Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan Carr-West. I'm Chief Executive of LGIU, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here to another one of our Ask the Expert sessions. And like all the events in this series, these are exclusively for you as LGIU members. And those of you who've perhaps only experienced LGIU through our briefings or our daily news update, we are the biggest independent local government membership body in England. We were created by three councils in England more than 40 years ago now. But today, your council is one of more than 300 LGIU members across the UK, Ireland, and Australia. Our job is to support local government, which means we're here to support you in the vital work you do for your communities, for your places. We do that through guidance on legislation, on key developments, through insight, analysis, shared learning, training, research, and opportunities like this to come together with colleagues and dig into some of the challenges that councils across the world are grappling with. And last year, we launched a new initiative called the Future Local Lab, which this is part of, which is an evolving program designed to help local government around the world to prepare for and respond to emerging issues. And we developed the lab because we think that whatever global trends we're looking at, and today is going to be a really good example, the impacts are felt in local communities, the impacts are dealt with by local government, and we're all seeking solutions to some of the same issues that work out across the globe. So it makes sense, we think, obviously, to share and disseminate learning, and today's session is just about that. Now, we know that threats to cybersecurity have shot up the priority list for councils in recent years, and I'm really, really pleased to welcome Ste Sharples, who's Assistant Director of ICT and Digital Delivery, Data and Digital Governance at St Helens Council. Vicky Willett, Director of Policy and Transformation, there is unfortunately unable to join us in the end this morning. Now, St Helens, as I'm sure many of you know, were put into the position a few years ago of having to respond to a major cyber incident. A lot of practical lessons emerged from that. And as St Helens are long-standing LGIU members, it was too good an opportunity to pass up. So Steve has very generously agreed to come along this morning and share some of those lessons and explore some of those issues with us. Before we begin with that, just a couple of items of housekeeping. We are recording the presentation from today's session, but we're going to turn off the recording for the Q&A and the conversation afterwards. So that will be Chatham House. We'll be having questions after Steve's given us his presentation. So feel free to add questions as we go to the chat, and our team will do their best to sort of collate them and pass them over to me, and I can pose them to Steve. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Steve to hear about his experience in this space. He's been with St Helens for almost 40 years, I think, and he spent many years in the council's development section, designing, implementing a whole range of in-house systems, as well as supporting most of the sort of other packages the council operates. So Steve, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to you all. My introduction, I think, was done just a moment ago. So yeah, I am the Assistant Director for ICT, Digital Data and Digital Governance at the Council. Vicky, as I think was mentioned, can't be here this morning, unfortunately, but I'm going to do her slides too. So I can just get the slides resharing. Do you want me to reshare the slides, or are they going to be done behind the scene?
Yes, please, Steve, if you can.
Yeah, no. Okay, can you all see that? Presume you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, sorry, forget the slide to move on. Well, the first of all, I'll give you a very quick, in a nutshell, view of what happened to us, because before I speak about the strategic reflections on this, it probably would help if you knew what had happened. So I've just got one slide on that. So on the 17th of August, it was 2023, what we subsequently came to learn was that someone had infiltrated our network by essentially procuring or buying an ID and a password off the dark web. They'd managed to log in using that and then elevated some privileges that were available to them within Citrix, and that gave them admin access then to our servers to roam around and have a look at whatever they wanted to. They managed to exfiltrate a significant amount of information from one of our file stores that we had, which was online at the time, to a cloud storage vendor in New Zealand. And we later found out that that data that was taken was concerned with our finance and accounts payable system specifically. Key to this was that we actually contained the incident on day one, which was really important. You know, we knew what was going on. We managed to contain it. We managed to start almost the recovery instantaneously from this, which is quite unusual. But early on in this, we had law enforcement involved because we were clearly concerned about the data that had gone and where it had gone to. They immediately put a block on that data. And we could evidence as we went through this sort of situation that that data hadn't in fact been accessed by anyone. We could track its route to the cloud server, and we could also evidence the fact that it hadn't been in fact accessed, which was good for us. So we managed to satisfy the ICO that we'd acted appropriately, and they took no action or no further action against us as a result of this. What we did do though is we ramped up our cybersecurity. We had a SOC and a SIEM that we were actually in the middle of implementing the SIEM when the attack happened, but we hadn't quite finished that. And we also improved our cyber posture through the team that was supporting that, so it was much bigger than it was prior to this attack happening. We fully recovered to a business as usual position within 10 weeks, and it's something we don't mind sort of telling people really. The total incident cost for everything and everyone that was involved was around £250,000, so much less than maybe some incidents that we've seen in the press. And we've been a significant contributor to the LGA cyber incident grab bag, which was launched about a month ago. I was part of the launch event from that, which is something that I'll mention in here, but not go into any detail. But if I could just say, it's well worth getting a hold of that if you can, and including it in your recovery plans or your continuity plans, because it's a great place to start based on experience that we and others have had who contributed to that. So what the reflections in this really are about, well, what was our strategic approach to this? What led us recovering that 10-week period in a pretty rapid scale? And what I've done is I've picked 4 of those, which are out of one of the main strategies on this triangle that you can see here. So we have 3 interlocking strategies: the ICT strategy and roadmap, 24-27. It had a predecessor. Digital St Helens strategy 24-27. It had a predecessor, and data strategy, which was new this year. The ICT strategy and roadmap we'd been enacting for maybe 3 or 4 years prior to that, and it had achieved significant success in delivering what we wanted it to do. But actually we realised when we'd had the cyber attack, it had had this kind of effect that it had allowed us to do this recovery in a much quicker time because of the strategic actions that we've taken as a result of that. So I'll look at a number of those, 4 of them from the whole strategy, which is this is our strategy on the page for the IT strategy itself. 4 of them I'm going to look at in a bit more detail: the cloud transformation, data management piece, device and desktop, and network and buildings. You can actually see the rest of it there, and there's a full strategic document that sits behind this, which I think is on our website, but I'm happy to share that and the other strategies with anybody that wants to see them. But I'm just focusing on a few key areas, those 4 particularly for this session. So they're outlined again. So the first one was cloud transformation. So at the time that the attack happened, 66% of our systems were in the cloud. We'd gone through a massive migration exercise and an adoption of SaaS-based platforms. So we were becoming kind of untypical really in the world of local authorities, in that we weren't really using our central data centres to active data centres that we had in the way that others were. We were well on the journey to cloud. Today, as I speak, 90% of our systems are in the cloud. We're now completing the final large-scale system, which should be there within the next 15 months. And then we will be a fully cloud organisation. Predominantly that's sitting in public Azure, some Oracle, and some bits and pieces of other cloud platforms. We'd recently implemented Microsoft 365 in the cloud. We had new applications via our transformation program that we were on with. And we moved as an interim step some of those applications that we didn't really have a view on what we were going to do with them long term into an infrastructure as a platform service in the Azure cloud as part of the Azure migration program that Microsoft run. All of our file shares had been migrated to SharePoint, which was significant when we look at the data that was taken and the effect that it had on the data that remained within those file shares and the action that we needed to take. We were secured and patched by Microsoft and by Oracle, so most of the patching that was going on in the organisation was actually being done outside of our own IT teams because of the SaaS systems that we deployed. But we had upskilled our own staff in all of those cloud technologies, and they were quite fluent with it by the time that we had the incident. And all of our platforms for development were actually completely off premise and sitting in this case, it was the Oracle Cloud for our KeynoteDB platform, and we had our GOS platform that sat on a cloud-based system with them. And the key to this really was that none of those systems were impacted. They were disconnected because the vendors took that action as a result of the fact that we'd had a cyber attack. They were sitting waiting. We couldn't access them. We couldn't do anything with them. But ultimately, that played a big part in the recovery. Data management. So we'd implemented a new data strategy aligned to data in the cloud. One of the things that we realized early was that with cloud-based systems, a lot of the time that the systems that you will implement don't have great backup regimes that come with them. We'd addressed that and implemented a full hierarchical storage management system. So we knew from day one that we had data related to every system that we had in platform that went back at least 12 months. So we were quite comforted by that really, because we knew that these people hadn't been in the system for more than 3 or 4 days. So, but if they had, we had a significant time that we could recover from. Microsoft 365, beyond the 30-day retention that you get as a basic offering with it, doesn't really back up beyond that. We'd implemented a new platform called Veeam, and we were doing backups on that too. So we knew that we could recover the 365 platform outside of anything that Microsoft could do. And we'd also reintroduced a piece of relatively old technology, which is a thing called air gapping, where the on-premise systems that we were backing up were taken off premise, so they're completely removed from our network altogether and stored in fireproof safes. That had largely stopped when we were introducing new ways of working, particularly with the cloud, that we had cloud backups that were taking place in the cloud. But we actually reintroduced that when we started to become more aware of cyber and the impact that it could have by taking that extra step. And I think sometimes the old ways are better, the better ways. And we still do that today with what we've got left on premise. So this approach provided assurance to us that what we were doing was safe and that we could recover in a variety of ways. So it did, gave us a bit of confidence when we were initially looking at what we needed to do. Two further things that we sort of had assistance from the strategy was that we'd migrated all of our devices to the Microsoft Surface, and we'd implemented a thing called Cisco Anywhere Connect, which is really robust and really reliable. We'd been using that since the pandemic when we put it live. Within about 12 weeks, we did a mass rollout then of Surface and a lot of other technology that worked, and it kind of proved to us that, yeah, it was a way to go with the kind of device options that we'd looked at and we'd chosen. We knew that they were robust and that it would work for us. We moved to a new telephony platform, a soft phone that was sitting on these devices provided by 8x8. And we'd also recently introduced bring your own device access to the whole Microsoft 365 estate. I think it's interesting in this that when we had the cyber incident, Microsoft 365 itself was never taken down. Microsoft didn't shut our access off to that, so we could still utilize email, which was really good for us. But also, if we'd had issues with the devices being affected, we could use BYOD access to get into that away from council devices. So the Surface Anywhere Connect, cloud technology and 365 all played a part in our sort of recovery and data management through the cyber incident. And the final thing I think from the strategy was the networks and buildings strategy that we were employing, because strategically we were reducing our buildings estate for savings and other reasons, partly due to the pandemic that we realised that agile working did actually, suit the way that we wanted to work. So people could work from home, but we also had flexible places for people to come in as a result of that. So we could bring people in when we wanted to, or let them work from home as and when their systems, were available to them. And since they all had access to 365, it meant that people could actually still do some work, even though lots of the systems that they were accessing were not available to them. So those things really, and I suppose for me, like the cloud migration was the big one that significantly underpinned our, sort of very quick recovery. Are the ones that I wanted to focus on within the strategic reflections piece of it. I know I only had 15 minutes to do this, and we normally have a lot more slides to that, but that was kind of the flavour of what happened and what we picked on strategically within that piece. Do you want me to carry on into Vicky's slides, Jonathan, or do you want me to pause for any questions at that point?
No, why don't we do everything all in one go, Steve, and then
Okay.
I think otherwise people will have such an interesting conversation that we'll never get to the
Okay, all right, no problem. Okay, so what these are strategic thoughts for local government leaders. So this is kind of like not being immersed within the boiling pot of doing the recovery itself and the containment. So the IT technical people. This is about people who might be your chief executive, your exec directors, your senior leadership teams, all wanting to understand what their reaction should be to a cyber incident. And we were really well supported at the time by what was our then chief executive, Kath Dwyer, who was really very supportive of us and the senior leadership team who rallied round. But actually, what we thought would be useful is we put this together to say, look, having gone through this, these are the things that as leaders you should be aware of when you're dealing with a cyber incident, because it's not always easy to understand some of the technology and the jargon that's flying around, and it can almost feel a bit distant in that you don't feel part of what is happening unless you're in there. So these are those reflections. I've only got 2 slides on this really, so it's quite a useful way to look at it. And I've just broken it down by day one, the first week, and then 2 weeks in. So for day one, a cyber incident is unusual. Most of us kind of hope that we'll never have to experience one within our careers. I thought I wouldn't, but I did. And it does involve a deep understanding of IT technology. But as a leader, you don't need to know that. What you need to know is that the people that are dealing with this for you are able to do that. I mentioned the LGA cyber grab bag because that is kind of a much better version of this slide, that it gives you a lot of information as a leader and lets you look out for things that you should be seeing happening through a cyber incident and questions that you can ask. So as leaders, you don't need to be an IT expert, but listen to your teams. And we encouraged ours, including me when I was going in and doing the presentations and updates, to de-jargonize what we were saying. But unfortunately, there is some jargon that leaks into this because you are dealing with a very, technical IT bound situation. So our advice was, if we do use jargon, you don't get what we're talking about, ask us and we'll explain it, but we'll use the minimum that we can. But try and understand a bit of what we are doing. And I always remember with this, and particularly with the chief exec, that it was amazing that within maybe the first 2 weeks she was actually talking back to us in IT lingo, asking us about where the VPNs were up to, what we're doing in terms of the cloud server recovery. It was really quite amazing how much they managed to pick up within a very short space of time. It made us feel a lot more comfortable then that we were actually saying things to them that actually did mean something, that they were working with us. Best advice, I think, in early days is try and keep calm and don't be jumping to conclusions. There is a lot of external help that can be brought to bear, but it also sometimes can cloud situations. You're best really to listen to what's going on from your teams that are on the ground, and by all means take advice from others, but don't try and use that advice as it's the gospel, because it's not. It's going to be individual to everybody and every organisation that is working with this. We found, and I didn't realise this until this happened, I thought when we had a cyber incident, if we ever had one, I would be kind of hauled in front of the town hall with the press and asked to account for myself and what we'd done in letting this happen and what we were doing about recovering it. It wasn't the case at all. Our comms team were really good, stepped in and took information feeds from us and passed those out to businesses and other organisations. We clearly had our own technical channels that we were using in IT. We were talking to local authorities around and about. We were speaking to them, in Chatham House style almost, asking for what they thought about things, and it was really useful to have that input. But don't be tempted to try and release things or say things that will confuse the situation even more and probably lead to more concern from the public. Let your comms team handle it, and they did a really brilliant job in this. In the first week, there is a lot going on, but as leaders, it's about looking for traits of a good response from your IT teams. You know, when you're getting a matter of days into this first week, particularly if you've got data that has gone missing, they should not just be containing this on their own. They should be speaking to the IG teams within the organisation, because it's not just a technical recovery. Data has gone missing here, and there's a thing that has to be understood about what the implications and what you need to do about that. You should also be, getting a bit of a sense that they do actually have robust recovery plans. And I'm talking about the IT team specifically here. I think if we're all honest, that, continuity plans that exist within services remain to be tested largely when something like this happens. My view looking back on it was the service plans themselves could have been better. The preparedness for what you do if you suddenly lose IT, rather than saying we'll wait for IT to recover these systems when it might be many weeks or months in some cases, doesn't really cut it. And having systems that are able to operate, even if it's going back to the old paper style way of working, is really good practice to have that in place and to run some sessions around that. But I think after the event, looking back on that now, we've put a lot more work into those service level recovery plans based on the fact, well, you've been through it, and what would you do now differently than what you did when this occurred? Who are your teams using as advisors? So a few days in, you should be hearing that they're working with a cyber partner. We actually had one, a forensic partner called Communicate, that we were actually implementing our scene with as this occurred. And they were on site literally within a matter of hours that morning, and it underpinned our decision to appoint one of them that were local to us. They were based in Leeds, we were based in St Helens, about an hour and a half away. They actually appeared on site within 2 hours. So we had them with us. They were the extra support outside that we needed, who could communicate and see things that we or no council would ever be able to see within the world of the dark web, and other things like that were going on. And they'd also dealt with other people before, like the NCSC, the LGA, law enforcement, and they were a really good source of assurance to us. And don't forget to tell the ICO early doors that it's happened. If you don't do anything else, make sure that the ICO know. They don't expect a detailed response from you immediately, but they do need to know that this has happened. And they're actually quite good at working with you and asking you, what they need to know, and can we tell them this information in a quite, controlled and measured way. So we found we had a really good relationship, but we did tell them early on. Use your experience as a leader. Do your team seem to be coping with it? Is your confidence radar being triggered? Because if it is, it has to be addressed. You can't sit back and let a struggling IT team just carry on with this. If you feel that there are issues, you need to address them, and you need to ask them, are you really capable of dealing with this? Even with the partner that you brought in, do you need more support? In our case, we did it with the partner, but it's really important that you get that sense of whether this is actually doable, or whether you need to start bringing more resources into place. And as leaders, I think at all costs, you need to protect their IT team. IT teams have the tendency to never want to go home. They'll work 24 hours a day. Some were bringing, sleeping bags and things in, and we had to stop that and say, no, you need to go home. We have to establish a proper rota here. But we will keep people away from you. We still had the old people ringing the IT service desk asking when they were going to get a system recovered. And the chief exec stepped in and said, no, you need to leave them alone. Do not go anywhere near IT. They're doing the job and they're getting on with what needs to happen. You're just creating situations that, they don't have the answers to at this point in time. They will let you know when they do. In a couple of weeks in, so at this stage, it means that you should be seeing a controlled recovery going on, or at least the shoots of one happening. If you aren't hearing phrases like statement of containment, which is a really important thing to look out for, the alarm bell should be running, particularly if you're hearing that a recovery is taking place, because you can't start recovering until you've contained the issue that caused the attack in the first place. So you need to be safe. Now, we'd done that within the first day with the help of Communicate. We were able to declare that we'd not only found the incident, but we'd taken offline every server and anything that was affected by that as part of the analysis that they did. And we were able to write a statement of containment and share it with our partners pretty early on certainly within that second 2 weeks, say that we know what this was, we've contained it, we've eliminated the threat, we're now in a process of recovery, and as systems come online, we will tell you about that. But that statement was something that everybody wanted, some more than others. Some wanted more detail in it, which is, perfectly right. Some wanted some conversations, but having that document and able to say that you knew what went on and you had stopped it and eradicated it is probably the most important thing in the whole event timeline. Ask for the updates to the recovery plan. So if you've been assured that they've got them, ask for updates from them, what is going on. You might be vague at that stage because they're only 2 weeks in, but nevertheless, there still should be some confidence that things have been addressed and that they are looking at, how this recovery is taking place, both across the whole, network and server estate, but for individual systems. So they should be able to talk to you pretty fluently by that time about what they're doing. You should be hearing what's happening with our partners that surround us. So in local authority terms, we're going to talk to people like health, central government, who aren't always the easiest to contact. One of the findings out of this was, that we really struggled to find one single point of contact for central government organisations that we could tell them that this had happened. We had to really go searching for that and speak to lots of different individuals, and sometimes through proxies. Who wouldn't even let us speak to the teams in the background. We had to go through third parties. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson out of this. Know who those people are so that you are aware how to get hold of them if something like this happens, so that you can start that dialogue, going early. Over all of that, we established a team command structure. So the chief exec, the exec directors, and whatever formed what we call the strategic command group. We met with them at 4 o'clock every day. We formed the incident response team, which was a more technical team. There are directors who I was responsible with, and we met at 8 or 9 o'clock every morning and gave an update, and that fed through to the SCG at the end of the day. And because it's a crime scene, potentially, data's been stolen here, people have infiltrated your organisation, document everything. So we kept a running log of everything that we were doing. And the minutes from both of those meetings became part of their evidential log if we were called upon later down the line, because of, law enforcement were enacting some sort of process, or, how we had done things so that we could, have all our ducks in a row should that have been the case. We actually found out what had happened and worked with the police on it. And we, to this day, have never managed to find the people that infiltrated us. The police probably said to us pretty early on it would be quite a tall order this to find the individuals, but nevertheless they tried, and they did support us really well through the whole process. So some final reflections and lessons learned from this, I suppose. No matter how long it takes, it's not a marathon. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You're going to take time to do this. Even after you've done the recovery, there's still things that you will be doing for a lot longer than the 10 weeks that we were. We were fully back to a business usual position after 10 weeks. Consider the mental and physical fatigue on the individuals right across the organisation. IT by second, third weekend are not the only ones that are suffering. All of the systems that are not being delivered and not working, those people who are trying to deal with those are also under a lot of stress. And even when the system comes back online for them, they're under even more stress than in trying to catch up with the work that hasn't gone on. Executive leadership team coordination is vital. So from the top, someone, the chief exec, needs to be involved in this and taking control from that side of things. And a strong command structure, as I just described there, is really important and worked really well for us. Support that recovery team from the top down. They're under pressure. So having the chief exec and the exec directors saying the things that they were doing and communicating with the organisation about what we were doing was really important. One really important thing to do or not to do is don't start an inquest during the recovery procedure. Don't start looking to apportion blame to individuals or trying to look too deeply in how we might have stopped this. That can all wait until you've got through this. And, one of the most reassuring things that our chief exec said early on in this was, I think the words were something like, no one's head will roll for this. No one was to blame, and it could have been any LA. She accepted early on that, it could have been the council next door to us that was having this, and we'd be looking from the outside in on what was going on there. She was very keen to stress that people weren't, under any kind of scrutiny about what they had done, even though we might learn lessons from it. We weren't singling people out or trying to, write some narrative about, well, if they'd had only done this or whatever, that would have stopped there. expect the unexpected, things recover in unexpected ways. So what you think your priority of recovering systems in, and I'm sure that everybody's got one, will not necessarily be the way that it works. Some systems recover more quickly than others because they're not as big in some cases. It's easy to restore them. You don't need third-party help with it. And some just happen to jump in that, it might be requested, if we can we recover this before something else? So it's good to keep monitoring that, but you will find that things do happen to come back and people say, well, why is that back? That doesn't seem that important. It's simply the way the recovery happens. So you might as well bring back what you can. If things happen in parallel, bear that in mind. Your whole organisation's affected. It's not just IT, as I've just mentioned. Make the time to reflect when it's over. And we've done that internally, and not just internally. I've done lots of presentations on what happened here, much longer than this one, to share what's happening so that others can learn from it, and then review and reflect on your continuity plans. If there's probably the most significant thing. We've changed ours from an IT perspective and ramped them up, but I know that's definitely happened in the service continuity world. With the learning that they've got from, this really has happened, hasn't it? It's not just something that we could say it'll never happen, or IT will get it back within a very short space of time. So I think that's it for the time I had allotted to this. So that was Vicky's presentation, the last one which I had done. So I suppose it's over to any questions, and I'll stop sharing now.
Steve, thank you so much. That's, fascinating, alarming, also a little bit reassuring. A lot of different emotions sort of listening to you, and I think that key, couple of things I took, and well done, kind of ventriloquizing Vicky as well. But a couple of things I took, particularly from that last bit, the point about not starting the inquest until recovery is finished. Though I guess that's easy to say, but quite hard to resist doing in the moment. And I think also that, those words from Kath, which, as wise as one would expect, about, no one's head's going to roll, and this could happen anywhere. It just happens to be here. So let's sort of